So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, broadcast and recorded live on blogtalkradio.com from the new media and baseball capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. My wife and I have always loved taking vacations in Maine and Vermont. That's not unusual for Floridians, of course, but it was reading the local paper in Manchester Center, Vermont, probably a decade ago, and now that I think about it, I think it was even longer than that I first heard of my next guest. The story was about a performance by a rabbi-turned-standup comedian named Bob Alper. Okay, rabbi, stand-up comedian. Just keep that in mind. I don't know if you've ever been in a Jewish temple. I have. They're not naturally funny places. Humor does not naturally occur in these places, not in my experience, not in temples I've been to. But Rabbi Bob Alper is a naturally funny guy. We became friends over the years, and for the life of me, I can't put. Maybe he can remember. I know it was that story in the Manchester paper that made us aware of him, but I can't remember exactly where we first crossed paths. But we did become friends over the years, and we visited and broken bread with Bob and his wife, and Bob with us here in Florida over the years. And we have seen him perform many times. We've also manned his book sale table once or twice. Anyway, he's just released the first DVD of his act titled, What Are You, a Comedian? So I'm using it as an excuse to feature my friend on today's show. Bob, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thank you. Nice to talk to you again.
Nice to talk to you. It just seems like minutes, doesn't it?
Well, yes. So you know where we met? How we met?
You
ready for this one?
Okay, please, because I've been trying to remember.
It's because Mimi and I were on a CompuServe chat room about Jewish topics, I think. That's how my first and then you appeared, and then you guys came up here, and that's how it all started, I think.
That's it. You know what? I remember that now. Now it makes sense, and that was the part that was missing.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is so long ago. It was CompuServe,
right,
which we've all finally abandoned. But I do remember that. She had been in contact with you, and then we saw the story in Manchester, and she put two and two together because obviously on CompuServe you don't know where the person is.
Yeah.
On online service, and that's what it was. And, you know, it's funny, but that would make you the third person that I've interviewed on Mr. Media because of someone that my wife encountered on a forum on CompuServe.
Wow. You should be around to the movies more often. So
well, yeah, I think you're probably right.
People.
I need to
but,
get her
they're
off
good. They're kosher people. She's in legitimate forums. So.
Well, I had on the first person was a guy named David Fury, who is executive producer and writer on the TV show 24.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, he was doing a TV show called Dream On for HBO. And then I think back in April, I had another guy named Bill Prady, who she also met through the CompuServe forums, and he is the creator and executive producer of The Big Bang Theory, which is on CBS now.
He's done some other stuff, and I actually met him through CompuServe because he was asking questions about conversion to Judaism for a subplot in one of the sitcoms he was working on.
Is that right?
Wow. Yeah.
It is a very, it was a very small community, relatively speaking, at that time.
Right.
Right. Wow. Man. So how are you?
I'm good. I'm sitting in Vermont. It's a gorgeous day here. It's 68 degrees and sunny, and we're loving it. The summer has gone very quickly, and I'm now getting ready. I'm sending out, you should pardon the expression, spam to Hillels and Muslim student associations to book shows for myself and my Muslim colleague Azhar Usman. We do a lot of college shows.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sending stuff out, and I'm actually, the headline of my spam reminds people that Azhar and I were on CNN Headline News on Friday.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, did a nice little feature on us.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this later, but let's go ahead with this now. You made a big change in your act several years ago when you teamed up first with Ahmed,
right,
a Muslim comedian, and you've kind of evolved the act. But tell me, let's go back to that point. How did it ever occur to you or someone that a nice, funny Jewish rabbi should team up with a Muslim comedian. I mean, that just seemed, like the opposite of common sense.
We call ourselves Comedy's Odd Couple. I explained at the beginning of the third part of our show when we're on stage together that we really are an odd couple. I mean, now with Azhar's 32, I'm 63. He lives in metropolitan Chicago. I live in rural Vermont. He's a Muslim. I'm a Jew. In fact, the only thing we have in common is that both of us are extraordinarily good-looking.
Ah.
The audience, they laugh at that. With the way it all started, it was in the fall of 2001. I hired a publicist in Los Angeles, and the purpose of a publicist, as you know, is to raise a performer's visibility. She was not particularly successful. She basically got me into the witness protection program. But after a couple of months, she called me. She said, "Bob, I got this great idea. Why don't you do a show with a Muslim comedian or an Arab comedian?" And I remember I said to her, "Do you have any other ideas?" And she persevered, even though I told her I wasn't interested. And it's not that I didn't want to work with an Arab or a Muslim. It's that I didn't want to work with another comedian. Because comedians are generally a neurotic bunch. And do I want to hang around with these guys? But she persevered. She found Ahmed pretty easily. We sent tapes across the country from L.A. to Vermont and back. And we really liked what we saw. And in April of 2002, we did our first show together at a synagogue. And since then, Ahmed and I have done probably 130 or 140 shows, a lot of colleges. We went to England together, all kinds of stuff. And Ahmed is now transitioning into movies. He was in Don't Mess with the Zohan. He's in a bunch of other movies. He's also traveling a lot with the Axis of Evil comedy tour. So he didn't have as much time to perform, and I needed someone else. So I Googled Muslim comedian, and Azhar came up. And so I've been working with Azhar for about 3 years, and he's a wonderful guy. He's from Chicago. He's of Indian heritage. His parents are immigrants from India. He's a lawyer who went into comedy a couple of years after he became a lawyer. And he's very funny. And so he and I have been working together since then. And it's all on my website, bobalper.com, BOVALPER.com.
Now, do these guys have any concerns about walking into a Jewish synagogue?
Once. The first time Ahmed performed with me, he had never performed he'd been in synagogues. His friends had their bar mitzvahs, but he'd never performed in a synagogue. And his comedy pals at the Comedy Store in L.A. said, "Don't do it. You'll be in physical danger." Well, these are Jewish comics who spend a lot more time at the Comedy Store than they do at synagogues. And I had a different take on it. And just by seeing Ahmed and his appearance on The View and corresponding, I knew that the only danger he would face would be if people would want to love him to death, which is precisely what happened. And he was very nervous. After the show, everyone was surrounded him, and the women wanted to fix him up with their daughters. So it worked out great. And no, there's never been any problems at all.
What about, right after 9/11? Because I think that was around, you had just started doing this before then, I think, right?
I got into comedy actually in 96. By 2000, I was doing it full time.
But you were working with a partner. I'm thinking it was around, didn't you start somewhere around 2000, 2001 with a partner?
First show we did was April 2002.
Oh, okay.
So things were quieter, but still very tense. And Ahmed addressed that. He gets up on stage. The first thing he says is, "My name is Ahmed, and I can't fly anywhere." So, yeah, that's always a part of the act. Azhar still mentions it too. He talks about terrorism a little bit. He's got a full beard, big guy, a lot of hair. He looks at the audience. He says, "If I were one of those crazy fundamentalist terrorists about to hijack an airplane, this is not the disguise I would choose."
It's been a real interesting thing of observing you over these years, and we go back to about 95, I think, maybe a little before then. But you were doing pretty well in terms of getting booked and getting attention, getting newspaper stories written about you, probably more so than the average non-denominational stand-up was, even when stand-up was...
non-rabbi comic.
Yeah. Because, you had a great, I hate to say it, but you had a great gimmick. And so you got a lot of press. And then you've correct me if I'm wrong, but you've had 2 further rounds of this type of attention, because when you started working with Ahmed, you got a round of publicity. And again, I mean, you've been in the New York Times in the last year or 2. You've been in the Boston Globe. You just mentioned CNN. Not bad.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. It's pretty good. And not only that, but it opens up new possibilities. I never would have thought that I'd be doing college campuses. I mean, how many 63-year-old comedians perform on college campuses? Never mind rabbi, Muslim, duo, whatever. Just on the, it doesn't happen. Most of the comedians on college campuses are 22 years old, wearing a black T-shirt, talking about I just broke up with my girlfriend, or drugs. And I do well on college campuses. Azhar and I did a show at Oklahoma State, and at that particular show, the audience was comprised of 300 Muslim students and faculty, 1 Jew that I knew of who came down from Tulsa, and maybe some Christians. And it was a great show. And it meant a lot. I mean, I always do well, and the students are very receptive, and it's just a great way to break down barriers, not only between Muslims and a rabbi, but also between Jews and Christians and a Muslim. All the way around, it breaks it down.
So I have to ask, I know the answer, but I'm going to set you up here. Why isn't there not a Christian comedian in the act?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the original idea was to have a 3-comic show, a Jew, a Muslim, and a Christian, but we couldn't find any Christian comedians. That's why I say that. The truth of it is, we actually have a show occasionally with a third fellow that I've worked with in a duo, and he's joined Azhar and me in a trio. His name is Nazareth. He's a great guy. He's a Arab evangelical Christian.
Okay.
And in fact, the New York Times reviewed our show that we did at Drew University, and they asked Naz, they said, do you ever try and convert, your evangelical Christians, do you ever try and convert your Muslim and Jewish comedy partners? And his response was, I'm the world's laziest evangelical. But, so he joins us, and also a great show and a terrific comedian. Frankly, I live for these times, because these men are not only my business colleagues and my performing colleagues, they're my friends, and I really love hanging out and getting together, and the late night dinners after the shows. And Azhar was up here with us. He stayed with us for 4 days while we did a bunch of shows in Vermont. It's really it's the best.
Bob, how has your act changed all these years? Maybe I should say, has it changed? Has it evolved from where you started? Is it?
It's constantly evolving. There's some jokes that will never leave the act because they simply work, and even people who sometimes I did a show on Sunday, and people came up and said, "How come you didn't do the joke about fill in the blank?" Because they've heard it before and they want to hear it again. Just like when I once heard Bob Newhart, who's my #1 hero, he did the Grace L. Ferguson Airline and Storm Door Company, and I've heard that probably 100 times on his record, but I wanted to hear it live. I wanted to hear him do it. And comedians, if you have good material, people want to hear it even if they know it by heart. So I don't change that much. On the other hand, as an artist, and as a creative person, the thrill for me is I can do an hour-and-a-half set. If I try one new joke and it works, oh, that's great. And if it doesn't work, okay, I'll try something else. I mean, on Sunday, for the very first time, I used a line. I said, my son, when he was in high school, he loved everything about the school except for the fact that the teachers gave the other students a lot of homework. It worked. So I'll probably leave that in, but I got to take something out, which is painful.
Now, I wanted to ask you, your kids are grown. I hate to give away the secret, but your kids are grown and on their own. However, you still talk about them in the act. How did they feel, when you started, and how do they feel about it now?
When I started, it was, my son when he was a teenager, I'd say something funny at the house. He'd say, ha, Dad, why don't you put it in the act? They weren't that amused.
Not
too much. They also understand as adults that going out and doing stand-up comedy is what pays the rent, and you never stop giving to your kids if you love them, and so it's they understand, and they also understand that it's put me into a career that I adore. So that's a nice thing.
Do you ever miss being a full-time rabbi?
Yeah, I was trying to put a show together in Florida, and my contact there told me what happened at the board meeting about the discussion back and forth. And gosh, I really miss those days, sitting at synagogue board meetings, pretending to take certain people seriously when I'm gritting my teeth. Yeah, I miss it. No. The answer is no. The only thing my wife, after a synagogue annual meeting, or during it, she wrote a note and handed it to me. The name of the synagogue was Beth Or, and the note said, Beth Or, an outlet for craziness among normally high-functioning people. So, I mean, I don't miss the politics of synagogue life. I miss certain things I do miss, of course. I miss hanging out with kids. I miss, the religious school. I miss life cycle events. Oddly enough, I miss doing funerals.
Okay, why?
Because funerals, particularly, strange or people funerals are an occasion for a skilled person to step into people's lives at a very critical moment and make a difference. It's also an opportunity to really mess things up. When my wife's uncle died, the officiant couldn't pronounce his last name, even though he knew him. And you remember that instead of the comfort that he might have been able to offer. But if a clergy person or a family friend or whoever can offer significant help in a very brief time at a critical moment, then it's very, very satisfying, and I miss doing that.
Anything funny ever happen at a funeral?
Yeah. I remember, I was on the pulpit. It was a huge funeral, and a friend of the deceased got up to speak. I had introduced him. I think he might have been a lawyer because he had a legal pad, about 7 pages handwritten, right? Gets up there, very officiously puts down the paper on the lectern, looks at the congregation and begins, "We've all gathered together to utilize Phil." And I just, I was able to stifle the laugh. I frequently use humor I used to use humor in eulogies when it was appropriate.
Right.
A 45-year-old man who drops dead of a heart attack, there's no humor there. And it's really hard to, although there might be some stories that are funny that you could tell. But I remember in particular a woman in her mid-80s, her name was Lillian, but they called her Diamond Lil. She was tough as nails on the outside, sweet as she could be on the inside, had a foul mouth, which everyone loved, and everyone told me about. And at one point during the eulogy, I said, Lillian remained character till the very end. Her niece came to her bedside the day before she died and said, "Aunt Lil, is there anything you'd like?" And she said, "Yes, a comb, some candy, a stack of 50s. Everyone laughed this kind of laugh of recognition because they remembered, yeah, that was Lil. That was our Lil. Or another time I did a eulogy and I met with a family. They told me about their mother. I didn't know her personally. So I simply repeated what they had said. I said, Rose was a wonderful mother, an adoring grandmother, a devoted wife. She was not a good cook. and the thing is, she was a woman who used to, point to herself as a bad cook. She was proud of it. Oh boy, I'm such a lousy cook. Don't ever ask me again. And it was funny. It was her signature. And to mention that really brought her back in the way people loved her. And it was through laughter.
Let me give out our phone number. If you've got a question or comment for Rabbi Bob Alper, who, not just a rabbi, is a stand-up comedian. Not going to find many of those, intentionally. His new DVD is titled, What Are You, a Comedian? Give us a call, 646-595-3135. One of the great things about the DVD, and as I mentioned, I've seen you perform several times. I haven't been to a show recently, but I have over the years. It's fun to watch the DVD and to see, even as you say, even when you know the joke and you know the punchline, like my favorite punchline, and you can fill in the joke if you care to. My favorite punchline of yours has always been Grandpa.
Right.
So
that's the old question. We named our son after my grandfather in following Jewish tradition, and we named him after my grandfather. We call him Grandpa. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not so funny when I've given away the punchline, but
no, that's okay.
It's still a funny joke. I love that joke, and a couple things come to mind watching the DVD. One is several times I was just laughing out loud, and Mamie kept saying, "What are you watching?" I said, "It's Bob. It's Bob." And so you don't have to be Jewish to enjoy your show. And I think, when we say rabbi-turned-standup comedian, that may immediately make some people go, oh, well, it's not going to be appropriate for me. But the fact is, it's humor that's found in life. Some of it just happens.
I'll tell you a little secret. The DVD, which is available on bobalper.com, the DVD was shot in Arlington, Vermont, and to my knowledge, there was one and maybe two Jewish people in the audience. And the rest, it was a totally Gentile audience. You'll see a lot of flannel shirts there. They're Vermonters, and Vermonters are not reputed to have the best sense of humor, but you can see how the audience reacted, and they do have a good sense of humor. In fact, there's a famous story about a humorist like Mark Twain or Will Rogers. Somebody came to Vermont, did a show, and there was dead silence through the entire event, and he was mortified. Never happened to him. So he pulled up his collar and pulled down his hat and sort of walked out with the crowd where they couldn't notice him to find out what was going on, and he heard an old Vermonter say to his wife, "Well, that man were funny. That man were funny. It was all I could do not to laugh." but this was filmed in front of an all Gentile audience, and you can see the reaction. Yeah, my material is meant to be crossover.
Well, it says here right on the package. It says hilarious, clean, Gentile friendly.
Right.
One of the things that I like, actually, besides getting to see the act again, which is it's fun to be able to sit at home and watch. It's kind of like having you over and saying, Bob, stand up, do a little bit. Right. There's two great bonus features. One is you being interviewed, which on the face of it doesn't sound that funny, but it's you at home in a comfortable chair with Barney, your dog, and the cat near the end comes in, and you're telling stories about your career, but also, and this I have not seen, and I've interviewed you several times over the years, and we've spent time together, but you've got video of your first appearance and some other really important milestones in your career.
Yeah, we sort of threaded them through. That first appearance, this was 1986, the Jewish Comic of the Year contest, and there were 13 finalists, of which I was one. And they knew I was a rabbi, and they introduced me, and the audience was sort of, titillated. Here's a rabbi in a stand-up comedy at a comedy club. I walked out on stage wearing a pulpit robe and spread my arms as wide as I could, looked at the audience and said, "Try not to think of me as a rabbi." that launched a career. Pretty funny bit. I've never done it since then, but
it was good, and I liked. I've seen you do the bit where you hold up a picture of someone that you look very similar to, but on the video you have a clip of yourself with Steve Martin's face. I don't know how you did it, but it was all over your back. So you just turned around and I'm sorry. You should tell the story. I'll blow it.
The bit was I said, after I did this, trying to think of me as a rabbi, I said, this is a comedy contest, and people always tell me that I remind them of a certain well-known comedian, and it really wouldn't be fair if you made that association. It wouldn't be fair to the other contestants. So if you do associate me with someone else, more famous comedian, please try to ignore it for the rest of the evening. And I took off my robe, and I turned around to put it on the chair behind me, and taped to my back was a huge poster of Steve Martin. In case they just didn't get it. In fact, in my act, I always say, people tell me all the time, it's hypothetical, it could never really happen, it's not a possibility. But given the way I look and the way I sound, if ever Steve Martin and Alan Alda were to have a child, and it gets a laugh, except at colleges, because they don't know who Alan Alda is.
Oh, isn't that scary?
So at colleges, I change it. I say, if ever, Steve Martin and Casey Kasem. And they like that. They get that.
I think you're going to have to...
Casey's an Arab, so they love that.
Oh, well, that's true. I was going to say maybe you have to change it to Dane Cook.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I sound like him. But
no, well, who's going to know?
They love him. But if they Casey Kasem, that's a pretty identifiable voice.
Oh.
But
well, what made you
all the way through there?
What made you decide to do to produce a video at this point?
I sort of stayed away from it because it's like giving away the act. And already, I already got a call. I got a call from a nice lady from Hadassah, and they want to order this so they can watch it. Not so they can hire me to come and do a show, but they can use it as their meeting. Well, that's okay. That's fine. But it's a good thing to sell. Of course, it's part of my income, my career. But it's also a great demo. And instead of just saying, I really am funny, trust me, call my references, to give them a demo, it's a helpful way to encourage people to bring me and my colleagues out to do shows. How we earn our living.
Well, I know you've already published. I want to say 2 books. Am I short one? Is there 3?
Yep.
2 books. One is a collection of cartoons based on the act, and the other is a little more serious, more personal type of essays. Oh, now I brought it up. I don't have the title of the book. I know you know the title.
I know the answer.
Okay.
Life doesn't get any better than this. Subtitled "The Holiness of Little Daily Dramas."
There it is. Oh, and are you still producing the cassette, or have you retired the cassette?
Well, the cassette is dead. It's gone. I shipped the last of them up to Canada, give out as prizes, favors at a convention. But the cassette is now a DVD, a CD. So I've got a CD, 2 CDs. One is a CD of the act, made in 1992, but it's still the act. It's pretty good. And the other is another CD called Guaranteed Funny, 101 Totally Clean Jokes. And the thing about both these CDs, I'm really thrilled about this. They play them 4 or 5 times a day on Sirius and XM satellite radio.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's on the Comedy Channel. The Clean Comedy Channel is on both stations. Plays them all the time. I'm driving along, listening to Bob Newhart. Boy, he's really funny. And then suddenly, on the crawl, it says Rabbi Bob Alper, and I hear my little voice. So it's pretty heady company to be in.
I'm surprised I haven't heard that. We, my daughter, of course.
Dirty Channel, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I've gradually been introducing her to. We get serious. So we started with, of course, she'd listen to the Disney Channel, Disney Radio, and then. About a year ago, I knew Bruce Springsteen was going to tour, so I started introducing her to Bruce Springsteen, and so she was listening to Springsteen, and I took her to see Springsteen in concert. And then we found the Old Time Radio channel, which we've always enjoyed, and she likes, so she'll listen to that. And then I really wanted to listen to, now, of course, I listen to Howard Stern, but that's another story. But I really wanted to be able to start listening to something else in the car when she's with me. I can't listen to Stern. You can't listen to Raw Dog, and you can't listen to blue collar comedy. So I thought, let me give the Laugh Break channel on Sirius a chance. So we've been listening to that, and now she'll get in the car and forego Radio Disney to put on the Laugh Break channel. So that'll be fun because, when your name pops up, she'll be like, oh, my God, Dad, look, it's Rabbi Alper.
Yeah.
That'll be great.
Yeah, it's on there all the time.
Let me give out the phone number again. I know we're for those of you listening on the archive who downloaded it on iTunes or Kindle or somewhere else, we're doing this early in the morning, and I know it's kind of a quiet time here on Blog Talk Radio. So, but if you're out there and you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, or if you've ever seen Rabbi Bob Alper perform, love to hear from you. Number is 646-595-3135. We also have the web chat going. So, you're welcome to enter a question there, and we'll be happy to ask it. The other thing that's on the DVD that I thought was really cool is Bob's 33 Best Jokes. and it's just joke after joke after, and that was great. I mean, you've gone through, as a viewer, you've seen the act, and you've seen, with the audience, but then you still get 33 more jokes. It was great fun.
I want to give people value.
Yeah,
it's added value. But yeah, I had fun. I told a bunch of jokes. We did it in a little cafe in our town, and live audience, and I told, I don't know, 80 or 90 jokes. I took the ones that came out the best, and it's pretty funny. Although, of course, I've heard a couple more jokes since then that I wish I had put on it, but that's the way it goes.
Now, do you ever get the itch to, tart up the act a little bit, throw in a 4-letter word, not in a temple or a church, but, when you're out in a club, add a 4-letter word, maybe do a fart joke, I
do have to be careful of my language. I was with a producer. I was going to do a little television thing.
Mm-hmm.
He'd seen my act. He said, "Bob, you really have to be careful of your language. Can't say certain things on television. You can't use words like oneg or bima or roof." But I don't use those 4-letter words like oneg or bima because it's actually, for the listeners who don't know, oneg means joy. It means the reception after a Sabbath service, and bima means pulpit. So, but those are the only kind of 4-letter. Otherwise, I'm not tempted at all to use language or in terms of fart jokes. One time I had to do something because, frankly, I forget what I had to get the audience back. I was performing at a college outside of Rochester, Nazareth College, and there were a group of teenagers, and they started laughing hysterically. And, you can't perform when that's happening. They weren't laughing at me. Something was going on, and they just kept going and going and going and going, and, 500 people wondering and somebody admitted that somebody had farted. So, how do you deal with that? So I finally, I ended up telling a joke that I'd never told on stage before, but I needed to kind of transition from fart back to the act and get the audience to focus on me instead of the kids. So I just told a story about what happened in Maine. It's from the Tim Samples album. Tells an accident. Mother and I went to Moody's Diner one night. That's by the side of Route 1 with the big sign that says Moody's, a blinking sign, Moody's, Moody's, Moody's. We sat down and a bunch of fishermen come in. Now, they were having a special that night. All the baked beans you can eat, $2.95. They started bailing them beans like they'd been on the ship for about 4 days. After a while, one of them let out a gigantic 37-second fart. They thought that a school bus had blown a tire out on the road, but no, it was 30 seconds. Some of the nuclear activists, they dove under the table. They thought the Wisconsin had blown up. Finally, I pulled myself to my full height, and I said to that man, how dare you do that before my wife? And he replied, oh, if I'd have known it was her turn, I'd let her go first. So that was my one foray into fart jokes. And what happened was, I wasn't proud of telling it, but it got the audience back. And now they were my audience and not watching these kids act out.
Now, are you ever heckled?
No. To me, the only kind of heckling is something like those kids, a distraction. Steve Martin has a great line. He says, distraction is the enemy of comedy. And so to me, a heckler is nobody yells at me. Occasionally, at the beginning of a show, someone will try and enhance the show by saying things and being part of the act. Mm-hmm. And I just ignore them. They do it for attention. And I think if I engage them, they would be very happy. But I ignore them. They realize that people don't want to hear them, so they stop. So hecklers for me are an older Jewish man who'll walk over to get a soda. That takes attention away. Or if something happens. I was doing a show in a synagogue in New Jersey, and about 15 minutes into the show, a man sitting in the front row, he was was looking pale. Then he turned white. Then he turned green. Then he keeled over. And we had to stop the show. They had to call the paramedics. They came. They were able to get him on his feet, and he was able to walk out. He was okay. But then, 45 minutes later, how do I restart a show? I just got up in the microphone, and there was a sort of tense, expectant quiet. I looked at the audience. I said, I wonder which joke made him sick. And then we're back.
Excuse me.
So I do, when I did comedy clubs at the beginning, I wouldn't have real hecklers. I was always afraid of a heckler. I was always afraid of especially anybody who's an anti-Semitic heckler. That would have been awful. But fortunately that never happened. But occasionally, you get a table full of drunks who are not paying any attention to you and are talking loudly, or one drunk or something. And I have only one line. I can say, excuse me, sir, would you mind leading us in the silent prayer? And the other heckler thing is cell phones. That's a heckler. And when a cell phone goes off, I say, okay, that's one. If it goes off again, you've had it. And when the show I did on Sunday, a cell phone went off twice, which meant the joke I was telling went down the toilet, and which meant I had to go into cell phone mode. So at that point, I just said, this has happened to me before. I was doing a show at University of Wisconsin Eau Claire with Azhar, full 700-800 people in the audience. They were signing the show, and somebody's cell phone went off in the back of the room, ruined the joke. So I just stopped talking, looked at the person who was signing, looked back at the audience, said, after a little pause, I said, I just want to see how she signs, idiot cell phone goes off. So it's like, it's a way of pointing the finger at the person whose cell phone went off, but kind of indirectly. But they usually get the message.
Bob, how did you know that you were funny and not just clergy amusing?
You can always tell, by audience reaction. I didn't get polite laughter or groans, and I learned quickly never to use puns, because puns a lot of rabbis love puns because it's an intellectual kind of humor, but it elicits groans, not laughter. The classic about the rabbi who says, okay, boys and girls, what was the name of Isaiah's horse? Well, no one knows. Well, it was Toothy. Why is it Toothy? Because Isaiah was quoted as saying, woe to thee.
Oy.
Yeah, right. So, stuff like that long enough, people avoid you.
Yeah.
You are like a living, breathing fart. If you tell jokes like that, people sort of want to avoid it. Anyway, so I would do... I knew something was going on with my life when, in conducting services, I always look forward to the announcements. That was my favorite part of the service. Because I could do improv, I could tell jokes. But I always was funny. In high school, I used to do Bob Newhart, Shelley Berman routines by heart. And that was kind of my signature. Put out the first April Fool's edition of our high school newspaper when I was the editor. And I loved going up to the study hall when the paper came out and watching kids open the paper, finding this insert, this April Fool's edition, reading it and smiling and laughing.
I don't think I've ever asked this. I know Bob Newhart was a hero of you. Have you ever met him?
I've never met him, but Ahmed and I did the Chautauqua Institute up in New York State, a very prestigious venue, a few years ago, and they told me that 2 weeks after we were there, Bob Newhart was going to perform, and I mentioned to our, the guest relations coordinator that he was my hero. So a couple days after Newhart appeared, I got an envelope that I'm looking at it now, a picture of Bob Newhart, and he signed it to Rabbi Bob Newhart.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I really prize that. But sorry, I've never met him.
Well, now, I also know that a great dream of yours had been, I don't know if it continues to be, unless I missed it, to get on The Tonight Show. Any progress on that?
No, I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I don't think it will. I think I'm probably too old, maybe too Jewish, I hate to say it, or too ethnic, let me put it that way. Even though my stuff appeals to everyone.
Well, it's not. What? Go ahead.
I always thought there might be a shot, and I continue to beat myself up by sending material out there, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I always say to my wife, a lot of things have happened. You can't accomplish everything, and I'm really, really fortunate to be able to pursue a dream of comedy, to make a really decent living at it, to have new experiences every year with different situations and venues and partners, and so it's really been a real thrill. So I can't let the Tonight Show thing, make me upset or whatever.
Well, but and that wasn't your ultimate goal anyway, right? I mean, you had one goal that was even higher than that, as I recall.
Well, yeah, I say in the act, I want to climb the celebrity ladder, step by step. And I mentioned, now I perform at clubs, organizations, theaters all across North America as well as London. Eventually, I said I'd like to appear on the Tonight Show, have my own HBO special, and then someday the Betty Ford Clinic.
Am I doing an okay job here of setting these up?
Absolutely, yeah. Good treatment.
It helps to have seen your work a few times.
Right. Yeah.
Oh man. Now let's see, we're recording this in August 2008. Where will you be in the coming months? Where can people look for you, and where can they?
Coming up, we've got Point Park University in Pittsburgh. We're going to do them. I'll be doing solo shows in Sedona, Sun City West, and Phoenix. Azhar and I are back at Onondaga Community College in Syracuse, and then DePaul University in Indiana. We've got a show at a synagogue in Mahwah, New Jersey, a synagogue in White Plains. Probably going to be in Toronto with Ahmed in November, and a bunch of other stuff brewing. Santa Fe, New Mexico, Andover, Massachusetts, Philadelphia, and this is really the height of the college booking season. So I'm sure there'll be a bunch of other colleges that will come through.
Okay. Well, folks, listen. You can order Rabbi Bob Alper's new DVD. What are you? A comedian, as well as his books, on Amazon.com, on BobAlper.com, or even MrMedia.com. And if you're interested in booking Bob for a show at your temple, church, college, performing arts center, or if you happen to work for The Tonight Show, check out his website, www.bobalper.com. Bob, it's always a pleasure. I love talking to you. It's been a great privilege to be able to call you a friend all these years, and I hope nothing but the best for you and your family, and I hope we have many more of these opportunities to come in the years to come.
And it's mutual, and please give my love to both of your ladies.
I will.
Maybe I'll get down to St. Pete one of these days again.
That would be nice.
They've forgotten my jokes.
All new faces.
What was that?
I said they're all new faces.
Yeah, and I should come down with Azhar. They'd love him.
Well, that would be great.
Yeah, he's wonderful. He's one of his best lines. His father is an immigrant from India, and he's a veterinarian. So he says my father's hilarious, but he doesn't know it. A man called Dr. Usman, my dog just bit me. His father says, is the dog all right? Yes, but so why are you calling me? He cracks me. I can do the whole act.
Man. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming on today.
My pleasure. Hope to see you soon.
Same here, Bob. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, for dozens more celebrity and media newsmaker interviews, surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com. Did I say that right? MRmedia. Yeah, MrMedia.com. Thank you. That's where you can listen to my previous conversations with the stars, writers, and producers of The Cleaner, Star Wars: The Clone Wars, SpongeBob SquarePants, Heroes, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Army Wives, 24, The Big Bang Theory, Bad Santa, Tell Me You Love Me, The Dark Knight, and many others. And please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites, whether you listen to the show on Blog Talk Radio, Digital Journal, Blueberry, Zencast, Odeo, Kindle, or iTunes. You can also send me an email if you like. It's bob@andelman, ANDELMAN.com. If you've got an idea for a show or you've just got a general comment, I'd love to hear from you. And folks, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to Mr. Media. I really appreciate it when you spend a little of your time with us here on the show. Come back soon. Bye, everybody.